Hey class, welcome to Module 2. I'm going to do an overview for this week. Usually I try to keep these overviews pretty short. However, today, because it's the first week we're doing QuickBooks as a required assignment, may be a little bit longer. So bear with me. Just a quick overview of Module 2, looking at the assignment. We see we have the reading. Shouldn't be a big, you should know about that. Then you have your discussion and engagement. Usually I have one or two questions that you have to respond to. If you have just one question, then you only have to respond to that question and then two students. If you have two questions, respond to both and then respond to two students in each. Fairly self-explanatory. The Cengage now, I'm not going to do anything in this discussion. Just remember it's due in this module. However, I'm not going to focus on the due dates for Cengage now. Just don't let it get snowball on you. I really, I would suggest that you complete them in the week that they're due. However, I'm not going to police that as heavily as the assignments that get turned in and have to grade personally. Those will definitely be needed. For example, the QuickBooks assignment is due Friday, and that will be graded on Saturday morning. So it needs to be done then. If you don't have it in, you'll get a 0 as per the school policy. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about QuickBooks. I'm not going to talk about Cengage now too much. If I decide later on I want to add anything to Cengage now, I'll do a separate video. So let's look at the QuickBooks assignment. You're due to do case 1 in chapter 3. Okay, to start out with, you should have already done chapters 1 and 2. They're not required as far as for points in the class, but I highly suggested in previous videos that you do chapters 1 and 2 because it sets you up and helps you to understand what's going to happen. Let's look at the case that's assigned, and we're going to actually come back. Looking at case 1, you see that you have to follow a certain set of instructions, and at the end of those instructions, we're going to go back through this in a second, but at the end of those instructions, it tells you to export certain reports. You're going to have to export a trial balance and transaction detail by account. However, if you just jump in and go straight into the work for case 1 in chapter 3, you're probably going to have a lot of problems. I mean, honestly, what you need to do is instead follow my lead on this. What you need to do instead is go through the chapter 3 and do what they tell you to do and then do the case. I assure you it's going to save you time in the long run. I'm sure it seems like it's taking you a long time, but when you end up going back and doing the entire chapter anyway later on and then doing the homework all over again, you're going to find, hey, it just would have made more sense to do it like it was suggested in the first place. The authors even say it. You're going to revisit the sample company you worked on in chapter 2. Remember, if you didn't do chapter 2, that's one of the reasons that you should do that. Because the sample company is provided by QuickBooks, and you get to it by going to a link, right? And this link takes you to Craig's Design and Landscaping Service. And what the authors do is they walk you through doing some of the stuff in chapter 3 that you're going to need to do for the case. But the examples use Craig's Landscaping Service, and then you redo it using your own company. So the way they did this textbook is that they walk you through the sample company, Craig's Landscaping, all through chapter 3, and then they give you the case. So the text will demonstrate how to do the tasks such as modify defaults, add new accounts, add new transactions, etc. These demonstrations will occur in the sample company. Now, remember, as it says here, when you modify the sample company, when you modify Craig's Landscaping, that is a QuickBooks example company. Once you close the browser, anything you did is gone. So that doesn't really affect you as far as your homework or your grade or anything. But if you go through and you do some stuff in here, and then you say, well, later on I'll come back and do some other stuff, well, it's going to be gone because this is for everybody in the world to use as an example company. So it always resets as soon as you leave. It's pretty cool how it works, but that's one thing you got to keep in mind. Then when it's time to do your own company, for Chapter 3's case, then you go back and you start working that. Now that's going to be your own company, so any changes you make in your own company is going to be saved. So even though when you leave Craig's Landscaping Services, that stuff resets, when you make changes to your own company, that stuff changes and stays with you throughout the term, throughout the entire semester. So you'll see that it walks you through and tells you exactly what to do. Now, keep in mind a couple of things. Remember that changes can be made to QuickBooks Online that don't necessarily get put in the textbook. As a matter of fact, looking ahead, it even tells us of one of these changes, right? Here's a great example. Here on page 41, it says when you do your journal entry, it says in the instructions, click in the category column. However, the category column has now been changed to the account column, and they even gave you a note for this one. But they don't always have that, ability to give you a note for everything that's been changed. So even though the instructions say to add to the category column, it now says account column. These changes get made from time to time, and QuickBooks Online can make them overnight. Textbooks can't. So just, don't worry about it. Remember, this part right here for Craig's Landscaping is just for you to practice. So don't worry too much about that, as long as you kind of get the gist of what they're asking you to do and you understand what they're asking you to do. Come back to the case and start working the case as they explain you need to do. So this first part is setting up the company. Anything you change in your, don't worry about anything you change in your company. You can always go back and adjust and fix later on. So if you are not 100% sure, remember you can go back and fix it. So there's nothing you're doing in your company that's permanent. That wouldn't be realistic in the real world. Things get adjusted all the time. For example, here in the company type, it says modify the tax form, then type retail shop or online commerce. When I look at my tax form, it says, doesn't offer me that to do retail. It doesn't offer retail shop or online commerce in that text box. It just says form 1120. Don't worry about it. Just if it doesn't show it, then don't worry about it. Just click save. There's oftentimes a lot of other questions, track classes, track locations. If it doesn't say anything about that, just ignore it. Just do exactly what it says in here. Add customer field to timesheets. So go to time tracking, add field to timesheet. They don't really have that. They have make single time activity billable to customers. That's not exactly the same as add customer field to timesheets, but it means the same thing. This both is just providing us the ability to bill customers. That's all they really want us to do. When you click on it, they have additional areas here for you to click on. If it doesn't say anything about it, don't worry about it. First day of the week, doesn't say anything about it, leave it as it is. A lot of times you're going to see that. There's a lot of different things you can select, but the textbook might not say what to do. You don't need to worry about it if it doesn't say anything. For the fixed assets, it asks you to do the furniture and fixtures. It shows you the original cost and the depreciation. So you go over here, track depreciation, and you have the original cost and depreciation. You make your changes and you save them. Over here, when it asks you to do your journal entries, all of these entries need to be done as journal entry number 1, and they need to be offset to the opening balance. You need to know your accounting rules. You need to know that accounts receivable, that's an asset. Accounts payable, that's a liability. Prepaid expenses, that's an asset. You need to know that stuff, and you need to follow follow exactly how I did it in the textbook earlier when it was doing it with the Craig's example company. So you're going to have to add these accounts. Then it asks you to prepare your trial balance. You're going to submit this, and you're going to also submit a transaction detail. So for your trial balance, it says prepare and print a trial balance report. Well, you're not going to print it from me. Instead, what you're going to do is for later on, you're going to export it. It says export your transaction detail by account, and then you name it, and then you submit it to me as your homework. The transaction detail, and you're going to export your trial balance. I think it's, yeah, export your trial balance. And you're going to submit that to me. It tells you how to name it, your name, and it tells you exactly how to name it. Your trial balance needs to look exactly like this. If it doesn't look like this is what I'm going to be grading right here. I'm going to look at this trial balance and just see if it's correct. Because if it's correct, then your transaction details are correct. If your transaction details are not correct, this trial balance is not going to be correct. So all I got to see is your trial balance to know if you did it correctly. If you didn't do it correctly, and when I was practicing this to make sure I understood what was going on for the student, mine was off, and I had to go back and I had to go through each step and see where did I make a mistake. And it's fairly easy to make a mistake. You just forget to read something, or you type in a number, an error. For example, instead of 20,000, you type in 2,000. You just got to go back and look at everything you did. Now, luckily, there wasn't too many things you did. You only made half a dozen, well, about a dozen changes. You got to go back and look at those, see which ones are off. If you follow all the instructions, if you go through the entire chapter and you go through and do the example company Craig's, and that makes sense, and then you go through and you do your homework for this case, and you do everything exactly as it says. If it doesn't say to do something, you can ignore it and just keep it as default. But if it says to do something specific, just do that. If you get these numbers in correctly as the right debit and credit for the balance, then everything's going to work out for you, and you're going to have the correct trial balance. So it's about 12 minutes into this. I know that's pretty long. I promise the future ones will not be this long, but wanted to really go through this with you and kind of help you get started on your QuickBooks. If you're going to turn in both the trial balance and a transaction detail, but I'm definitely going to look at that trial balance and see if it's correct. If that's correct, I know your transaction details are correct. If you're off a little bit, don't worry. I mean, I'm not going to fail you or anything, but you're going to need to try to fix this because it could affect future chapters as you work through the textbook.